This is our bread tank. It symbolizes that weapons could in fact be food. As little as 10% of global military spending would be enough to eradicate hunger in the world. Our demand for a reallocation of military funds had already been supported at the UN Rio+20 summit in 2012 by well-known personalities and organizations, including Mayors for Peace, with more than 5,700 mayors, and ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, with over 1,000 member cities in 85 countries.
E certamente o desarmamento, mesmo parcial que seja, seria suficiente para gerar recursos para resolver uma série de situações que tornam a nossa humanidade infeliz.
The press reported on our appeal in more than 30 countries, and it was signed by many famous people.
The continually buying more hardware and more weapons is not the answer to any question.
We must choose the peace.
One year later, in July 2013, we wanted to get the Pope on board as well. We'd heard that he was coming to this year's World Youth Day, which was taking place in Rio de Janeiro, where the base of our bread tank was still sitting in a garage. So we wrote the Pope a letter. Sadly, the letter was lost in the course of the travel arrangements in Rome, and so when we arrived in Rio, we didn't have an appointment for the Pope to visit our tank. And as was to be expected, he had a pretty busy schedule. Nonetheless, we had bold plans for the bread tank.
A gente está indo agora para a comunidade de Varginha, dentro de Manguinhos, onde o Papa amanhã vai fazer uma reza. Ele vai descer do Papa Móvel e vai entrar na igreja. Então a ideia é que a gente chame a atenção dele bem próximo do tanque, né?
We faced two enemies. One was the pouring rain that completely soaked the bread. Even though we'd used stale bread, this was still catastrophic. The other enemy was the security forces. In Rio, more than 20,000, mostly heavily armed, members of the Municipal Guard, Federal Police, Military Police, National Security Force and Brazilian Army were in action. They were everywhere, cordoning off roads, demanding all sorts of documents and forcing us to make long detours. Besides the security forces, there were also 2.5 million pilgrims. The pilgrims loved the bread tank, which was great but unfortunately often made us late. The enthusiastic masses then blocked our view of the Pope, and in turn his view of us. And always the rain. And the military. But we weren't the only ones getting frustrated. The protest group 100 yards away had also hoped for more attention, especially from the international media. To accelerate the current urban development plan, the military simply tore down their homes at night.
Mas ainda tem, eles vão avançando, eles querem avançar, retirar toda essa parte. Onde tem casa em pé, eles querem derrubar. Mas o negócio que tira a pessoa de uma miséria e põe ela numa miséria pior ainda.
Então, eles forçam a gente a sair com pressão. Como? Marretada. Marretada lá na sua casa, aí depois com a reta escavadeira, poeira em excesso.
Eles entram no nosso território como terrorista, entendeu? Matando, humilhando, esculachando. Assim como fizeram na Avenida Brasil, mataram 13 pessoas. E tem 13 pessoas cidadãos. Se fossem bandidos, fossem presos, mas não mortos. As pessoas aqui não são vistas. As reportagens não vêm, então já que vocês vieram, graças a Deus, e que a nossa força é somente acreditar que alguém possa escutar e atender o nosso pedido de socorro. Deus ficou com pena de nós e queria que a gente aparecesse de alguma forma, porque na verdade estamos sofrendo muito. Então assim, graças a Deus que Ele veio, para que vocês viessem ver a realidade como que é que a gente vive.
Being told we were sent by God was of course flattering, but the other statements shocked us. Rio de Janeiro is full of exuberant vitality and lovely people, and brutal state violence. But isn't this what our disarmament appeal is also about? The military being used within state borders? The money that the state could save could be invested in alleviating social deprivation. The population would be less prone to riot and protest. And despite the reduced military presence, greater social peace would mean better internal security. This kind of change in thinking is badly needed, and not just in Brazil. In many countries, governments unfortunately still don't realize that security cannot be provided by the military, but can only be guaranteed by social justice. Does the Pope ask himself the same questions? Yes, we believe he does. It is, after all, his forthright championing of social justice that triggered the enthusiasm of young people all over the world and brought millions to Copacabana Beach to celebrate. In all the rapturous exhilaration, most people didn't even notice the warships. At a rough estimate, for the price of 2 such ships, 8,000 schools could be built in Africa, 40,000 favela homes improved in Brazil, 70,000 children with HIV treated for a year, and 700,000 hectares of deforestation replanted. Or 58 million caipirinhas drunk. We're in Rio. Viva la vida. At some point we'll meet the Pope. Definitely.